Welcome to our podcast series, WOW Series, Backstage with Visionary Leaders. At Genio, we are privileged to work with visionary leaders, helping them design and create better futures for themselves and their organizations. Each has taken a different path to the top, and these podcasts provide some intimate insights into what drives them, as well as some of the lessons they've learned in their long and successful careers. And now, over to your host, Genio CEO and founder, Frederick Brunner.
Good morning and welcome to our podcast series Backstage with Visionaries. This morning I have the pleasure to welcome Peter Goldschmidt. Peter is a super successful CEO. He has been successful in a lot of different geographies. He's been in Asia, he's been in Europe, he's been in the US as a CEO. But also he has been very successful as a CEO in very different constellations, in Fortune 100, in private equity-backed companies. And he's here today to share with us lessons he's learned, have an open conversation on the tips that led him to the top that everybody can learn from. Peter, it's a great pleasure to have you today on the podcast.
Freddy, thank you so much for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here and looking forward to our chat.
Super. Excellent. So, Peter, I'd like to start with what I call a starting package. Everybody in life starts with a package, and usually that package is family. So what was your family like, and what have you taken out of your family when you were young?
Yeah, I would say if I talk about family, there was one predominant thing, really, and this is my father had built grocery stores, so he started after the war and with his first store, the first store where you could pick your stuff self from shelves. And we always lived above one store. And from day one, more or less, I was used to understand what is the margin of a liter of milk. I was used to understand how cash flow works. It was a constant discussion at lunch and dinner table. So that was pretty good. But I would also say growing up in East Westphalia, which is in the middle of nowhere in Germany, I don't know, 40 miles away from the next highway. It's an area where people are very direct, they're very clear, they are, as people say, brutally honest. And that's also something which I think has influenced my upbringing.
Interesting. How much would you say that this kind of living above the grocery store and your father bringing, let's say, business topics in the family has shaped you, and have you taken away from and used in your life afterwards?
I mean, in the end, what really sticks is not only the content. Yes, you learn the content, you understand how business works, right? You learn, you experience this. But I think it is more really the values and the attitude related to it, because I think the reason why it stuck with me is because my father was always super enthusiastic what he was doing. He just liked what he did, right? He liked the numbers. He liked to work with people in the stores, and he had certain core principles for his business, right? And I think that's really what is sticking, because the content you can learn, the content even has changed. How you do business 40 years ago versus now is very different. But I think these values and core principles, I think that's what you discover. And I don't know where it's coming from, but everybody of us has this déjà vu where you say, hey, I don't understand with 16 years why my parents are like this. Now we are 40 or 50 and we discover, hey, actually some of the stuff is still there, right? We are similar, right? And we made it our own principles.
Yeah, absolutely. And then after the second part of the starting package is at some point you need to choose a direction in career. And before we talk about professional life, I'd like to make a quick stop on what did you decide to study? Because I would have thought when I met you the first time, you must have studied economics. And I was surprised that you studied something different. So can you tell us a bit what you studied and why you studied it?
Yeah, so in a way, a little bit similar story from what I just said. So my father was as disappointed that I didn't study economics as you have been surprised potentially, and a lot of people. But when I looked at economics, I thought, yes, this is important to understand, and that's important to learn. And I think you can do this more or less anyhow. But what I really, really found interesting is everything around it, right? How does it work? What does culture really mean? How do people work together, right? What is the data behind stuff? So what I really decided then and found very interesting is to study sociology. And I focused on industry and business sociology, meaning how people work together, how groups work together. And the other part of it was empiric social science, which is a lot related to how do you understand how people think, how they behave, why they behave, how they behave. So this whole dynamic of sociology and psychology around why people take decisions and how do you lead organizations and steer organizations from a data and psychological standpoint, I found so exciting. That's why I decided to study sociology.
And what was then the bridge for people who know you and read your CV? As I said in the introduction, you obviously had a super career in life science. So what was then the bridge then from sociology to how did you enter life science?
It was pretty easy, right? As I said, I was empiric social science. Empiric social science, you do a lot of statistics, you do a lot of data management, you understand, as I said, the trends and how people behave. So I started in the market research department of Sandoz and did exactly this. I looked at numbers, I looked at behaviors of people, why people purchase certain things. And I was fortunate to work both in the beginning on the OTC side and on the RX side. So it was really great. On the other hand, it was boring after 2 years. So I had to go into marketing and sales relatively fast because I wanted to be where the action is.
So let's jump a bit to your career. You know, when one looks at your CV, obviously there's a lot of success, etc., going upward only. But I also know once you shared with me that you have to go out of your comfort zone, and that a lot of the time this is where a lot of learnings happen. So when you reflect a bit on your career, what moments were you pushed or did you choose to go out of your comfort zone to learn things?
Yeah. So to be really honest and not to contradict you, but it was not always like this. I think if you look at the CV, there's some steps where you might say, "Hey, why did you do that? Right? Why was this the right move?" So I would say I would put it under the umbrella. I had the opportunity to have a lot of different learning experiences, and the title and the next step was sometimes maybe not that important than doing something completely different. So considering having been then in marketing and sales and doing different jobs, so I had a lot of side steps. Being head of marketing, then head of sales was the same level in the same organization, but you got a completely different understanding, right? And a completely different view. Being the commercial lead for Novartis Germany, where was you had billion sales, I had over 1,000 people. And moving to the Philippines with a P&L of 40 million it doesn't sound so attractive on paper, but on the other hand, completely new environment, culturally exciting, completely different role. So learning experience was really fantastic, right? And in the end, it's all also about not the content you learn. It's really how to deal with areas where you're in the end not an expert and where you potentially have fear, and then see how you can live through that fear to do what's really right for the business and right for your personal development.
Maybe to double click on these side steps, because there's a lot of young leaders that I think misunderstand how sidestep can be extremely valuable in a career because of what you learn and learning cross-functional things. What is your view now? You're the CEO. When you see the career of other people, why are sidesteps sometimes the better things to do for your career to become afterwards a general manager? Can you comment a bit of the value of sidesteps and knowing different functions versus going fast simply in one direction?
In the end, it's pretty simple, right? It is about managing your fears. It is about understanding what it would take as a reward to go into the fear zone. And that has a lot to do when you have the opportunity, or when you have a mentor or coach or parent or whatsoever who can help you to understand how to overcome your own roadblocks. Because the most difficulty I have is people like who are 4 or 5 years in their career. They say, I cannot do this, I cannot do this, I cannot do this. I cannot move because we have a child which is 2 years old. I cannot do this job because I don't know it, right? And the point is, because you don't know it, go there. The learning opportunity is the best, right? And that's what people say. If you always go the same path, it's very difficult to discover something new because of two things. One is you know a lot of things, and because you think you know a lot of things on this path, you will not see the things you haven't never seen on this path. So if you go different ways, you will discover more. And I would say actually that millenniums, they have partly a different thinking about this because they want to do, and I hear this a lot, so really people coming now from university, they really want to do where they go, where they think they can contribute. So I have the feeling, at least, titles and the reputation of a certain role, and partly even the money, doesn't play as much of a big role than, hey, I can contribute here and I can learn here. And I think if you have this as guiding principles, what you can really learn, how you can go out of your comfort zone, how you can overcome your fear, that really enhance your personal development. Because a career is not what's in your CV. Your career is what's your personal development journey.
We talked once about leadership, and I remember you said that over time, you have what you believed when you were at university, and then you also learned what it means in practice. And I remember that you had kind of an evolution from competing with others, which you learn at school, versus kind of leading through others. Can you talk a bit about how essential that is, how much of your success it was, and how do you approach leadership today?
I would say that's the something everybody has to go through, and it has not really so much to do again with hierarchy. It's just how you look at things. And I would say it's this transformation from being a manager, from being a functional expert, from being only the doer, versus feeling really responsible as a leader in terms of developing yourself and the people around you based on the purpose you have, the purpose the company have, and your own values or company values. And I think that's not an easy process, right? Because for me, I can clearly say this. When I became a brand manager, I just wanted to be the best brand manager, right? And then of course you can work harder, you can work smarter, you can connect yourself with people who can inspire you. But in the end, it was all about, hey, I want to be the best in what I'm doing. I want to run the fastest, jump the highest, and then people will see I'm the best. And then to understand that actually doesn't really help your development, and it doesn't really create long-term success. That's tough. For me, this tough moment was coming back to what I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. And I moved from being the head marketing of being head sales, right? And in head marketing, I mean, the team was not like super big. I mean, still like 40 people or so. But that's something where you can create this excitement on content, on knowledge, on we analyze better, we do this better. But in the end, if you then come to the sales force, yes, you can also see, I mean, which are the best guys. You can also run by data, but you would lose. And I was close to not succeed in my role by thinking I knew everything and I could drive everything. But you cannot drive 1,100 people. You have to lead through others. You have to create an organization with the right attitude. You have to understand that you have to support people, that you have to create the right vision for the whole thing. And then you have to grow, right? But that's a tough process because you have to let loose a little bit the content side and the experience side and the knowledge side, and you have to trust it. I actually observe that, of course, every CEO or every leader is talking about the power of purpose-driven leadership, the power of a culture-driven organization. But in the end, what I see in practice is the moment there's pressure in the organization, the moment there are high expectations, people fall back into pure performance management, and then don't really lead through what I think in the end creates real the result, which is, as I said, giving a purpose, having a vision, and build the right culture with people with the right attitude.
You know, I've seen you in action over the years, and I'm very impressed. And there's two things I'm very impressed with that you just mentioned is leading with the vision, and I'd like to talk about in the next minute, but also this attitude and hiring for attitude. I remember once you told me, Frederick, you need to hire for attitude. What does that mean? How do you know what is the right attitude? What are you looking for? Because I fully agree with you, but I think for our audience, it's important to understand what is a guy like Peter looking for? What is the right attitude that one should have?
Yeah, so I give you the example, right? You can have a fantastic soccer player, right? Plays first division in whatever league in Europe, and he has shot a lot of goals in the past, right? So now he wants to move. You think you want to hire him, and of course, there's proven past success, but it doesn't mean he will be also great in the future. So I think it's better to understand, why does he fit to the team? Is he really fully motivated? Is there the hunger after he had a couple of very successful years? Why does he love that club? And in the end, it's the same for me. Of course, we only look at people who have a proven success record, right? Who are smart, who have driven businesses, who has developed it. But in the end, people are driven by their motivations for what's coming up in life. And that's why, and you can see this in a lot of research, past experience is not a guarantee for future success, or past success not for future success. So it's in the interviews I do, of course we check in how people have done, right, and the CV and everything, but in the end what's really important is, do they love our purpose? Why do they love STADA? And why do they think they can be an ambassador for our values in STADA? And how do they want to lead through this? People who are just interested in the title and money, I'm not so much interested in, right? Because we need people who have an understanding what it takes to be the best, and that's key. So I would say it's the combination of a strong performance track record, but the right attitude to lead and to want to win and to be the best in what you are doing.
If we talk about vision, and I remember when I first met you, I think you were at Sandoz leading the CEE region, and that's where I saw that you really had visions, but more importantly, your team shared the same vision. And this is not always the case when I look at leaders. You know, there's like a vision on paper. When you look in reality, this is not the case. How do you approach having a vision and having your team sharing that vision to be led by that vision?
It's all about authenticity, and that you're able to explain it all the time. And that means also you have to over-communicate on it. People will smell very fast if you just talking about what a communication head has told you and you do it twice a year. Or whenever you are at a dinner meeting in a country, whenever you are at a town hall, whenever you are at a talent workshop, whenever you are at a training, and you are consistent and you always repeat what's your dream, and people get excited by your dream, because in the end the vision is nothing else than a dream. It's something you really want to go for, right? This is what you love, this is what you want to achieve. And then if you link your vision to certain objectives, only then you can explain actually your strategy, right? If you don't have a dream, then how do you want to explain people what's actually the strategy? What is the how to get somewhere, right? Strategy is nothing else. It's the how to get somewhere. So with the dream that we have now in our company, I think it's pretty easy to explain people, hey, these are the 5 strategic pillars we need to deliver on. And then also it gets all easy, right? Because sometimes organizations are very complex, right? You work in different fields, but you have to synthesize, you have to make it easy. And I think that's really the power. I mean, be authentic, live it, over communicate, and link all pieces of how you lead together, right? There is the purpose, which is the overarching reason to exist. The vision is the dream where you want to go, and the strategy is in the end nothing else, how to get there. And I think you have to be obsessed in communicating this, by the way, not only internally, but also externally. And if people see that is in sync, I think that creates a lot of power.
If we talk about that dream and how to get to that dream, there are different leaders communicate that in different ways, but you are, in my view, an all-in leader. And I have not been with you, but I heard of that you have taken your team places to discuss these things. I heard you have taken them to the desert. I heard you have taken them. So how far do you go to share this, and how do you do this sharing with your team so you feel like this really sinks in? It seems like you really go an extra mile to have this dream being a shared dream.
Absolutely. So people talk about the leadership journey. People say there's a road to success, right? And I believe we can not only lead intellectually sitting in our offices, right? I believe it's like always look and feel, right? And that's why I love to be with my team on a journey. I don't sit with my leadership teams, even the broader ones, just for 3 days in a hotel. Mm-hmm. Of course, sometimes you have workshop and you need to do a full day, but even then you can do stuff in a different way. But everything it's clear. If you sleep with your leadership team in a tent somewhere in the desert and you walk together through the sun and it's hot and you're hungry or thirsty and you experience different stuff, I think the journey is very different, because in the end we have a lot of senses, and I think it's really important you create this journey feelings. And journeys are tough, journeys are fearful, and we make it even partly the journey of the unknown. So we don't even tell, or I don't even tell, what's the next step in the journey. And it's like in business, because you don't know exactly what's the next challenge. Mm-hmm. Who had COVID on the radar, right? Who had on the radar that there is now relatively a strong inflation and prices are going up in certain areas? Or who had on the radar that COVID would lead to certain supply shortages, mm-hmm. right? But the better you understand this journey of the unknown and the team you're working with, I think it's super strong. And it shows you also one thing, which is very difficult in life to accept, because we always have this assumption or feeling that one day I will be there. One day I have reached this. And my feeling is you never reach the final goal, mm-hmm. because, as the Americans say, the road to success is always under construction. Mm-hmm. And I would say, actually, the road to fulfill life never ends until life ends. Mm-hmm. And that's why I want to have a much broader experience and a much broader view on leadership than talking about business. Leadership, in the end, is the development of yourself in a holistic way, and not what you're doing mm-hmm. at the time when you're in the company.
One thing I'd love to talk about is something that you do extremely well, better than most as a leader, is I have never seen you not having a good day or not being positive. I'm very impressed, because it's tough to be at the top of a corporation, and I know you have a thick skin, and some of that might come from the past as a childhood, but how do you do that? I think it's a remarkable trait you have to be always positive in a turbulent world, in a construction road, in everything. So how do you do that?
So I think in a way it's also my upbringing. So I have, if you want to say so, I have good genes and a good socialization. Mm-hmm. I also had some events in my life which reinforced the positiveness mm-hmm. in addition. And unfortunately, one of the core events was about a tragic loss in the family, mm-hmm. and which gave me, in the end, as tough as it was, a better view on how grateful you have to be for every day you have mm-hmm. when you're healthy mm-hmm. and live in a very privileged environment. Mm-hmm. And So that's something I'm really happy for, right? Happy for being healthy. And that gives me a lot of positive energy, because you only find out what the world could look like if you're not healthy. And then a lot of things become very different. So for me, this guiding principles and how I manage it day to day, because that was your question, Fredrik, is twofold. So there's a technical element mm-hmm. that I really think about in the evening when I go to bed, what was really good and what was great. So it's in a way like a little self-programming on the positive side mm-hmm. and not on the negative side. But it's also about to think about like if you are positive, you just feel that others are positive too. So there's mm-hmm. actually a selfish component in here. Mm-hmm. That means like I hear it so often that people say, okay, I mean, it's great, it's fun, right? We have a positive meeting. And I think that doesn't mean that you can be tough. Everybody who knows me, we can be also tough. We can be very clear and we can be very straightforward, but still you can do it with positive energy. And that gives you strength and gives you actually a better acumen in your environment.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, very much like that. There's 2-3 topics that everybody talks about in the economy, but I think you really have a very interesting view about these. The first one is about growth. Why is growth important, and how do you think about growth personally?
I believe, and that, by the way, Frederick, that's a great question. And I got this question when I came to the company I'm now running a lot, right? Because they said, "Hey, Peter, why are you so obsessed about growth? Why is 6% not enough? Why does it have to be 10 or 12?" And actually, for me, it's not about 6, 10, or 12. For me, it's about the mindset behind, because I believe the growth in the end idea triggers innovation, triggers doing things different, bringing yourself out of the comfort zone, doing stuff in a very different way than others are doing it. So this growth then goes hand in hand with personal growth, right? Because this is actually, for me, really the link. Just to sit there and tell to people from a old school performance management style, let's outperform others. Fine. But that in itself doesn't bring anything. Let's be smarter. Let's lead better. Let's get to new ideas. And if this leads then to growth, I think that helps. And of course, there's a technical component in it as well, right? Because if you grow, obviously you have more money to invest. If you grow as a person, you have potentially more ideas and do things different. So I think a growth mindset gives you more beauty in life and gives you more opportunities in life versus a fixed mindset. But really, to drive it down, it is really in the end about one thing, and this is how you manage your fears, right? I think most people I have observed with a more fixed mindset and a narrow view on life, they are more fear-driven than people who say, hey, what do I have to lose, right? What is there? Let's be honest. Let's be open. Let's be brutal. Yeah. And with this, actually, we come back to what we have discussed, to the culture. So if we create a culture of the self-empowerment and self-growth, then you have a much better chance as a company also to succeed. It comes back to this point of attitude.
I very much like that. I like this growth at the granular level, at the personal growth or innovation that leads to the numbers, not the numbers being I very much like that. The other topic, I know you have a strong talent about it, which is a buzzword I think is misused by many, is diversity. What is your view on diversity, and why should people care? Why is that important?
So, number one, I mean, becoming more global, I think it is very important to understand just different views, and you benefit from it, right? And again, it's not about that this culture is right, or this gender is right, or this race is right, or this, right? There is no right or wrong, because that's per definition the meaning of diversity, is that you just look at things from a different angle. Because there is, like, if you look into in philosophy, even in a broader context, right? What I really strongly believe in is that things in itself, or events in itself, they don't have a meaning. We give events meaning. We give events meaning based on our socialization, our cultural context, where we are coming from, right? And if you have stimulus from whatever area to give things a different meaning, or even try things from different angles, it create much more fulfillment. And I think it's the same story what we discussed before. Diversity is about not having fear to say what you think based on your environment you're in. It doesn't mean that is the decision you want to take. I'll give you an example. So when I came to the Philippines, it's obviously a very different culture than Germany, right? Very different values, very different upbringing. So a lot of things are very different. And you have to make up your mind, like, what is important to understand the culture? How can you teach the culture so you understand why people behave, how they behave, versus what you think should be the right values in a company so that the company is successful in working. Mm-hmm. So my learning was really, it is about understanding the Filipino culture, but not making the Filipino culture your company culture, mm-hmm. right? Because there have been different things in an international organization. Mm-hmm. And I think that is really important. And the second thing, Frederick, I really would love to say, mm-hmm. and that's also the problem, we make diversity a statistical exercise very often. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Diversity is to give a safe environment as much as possible where people can empower themselves to speak up what they think, mm-hmm. right? I believe diversity only works if you say what you think is the right thing to do, for example, for the organization or for the people. Mm-hmm. And the right thing is maybe not what others perceive as the right thing, but you have to speak up, and then you only bring then a piece to the table. And I think that is very important. So diversity has a lot to do also with self-empowerment, right? Because you can have whomever in the company with a very diverse background. If people don't speak up, mm-hmm. then what's the point?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. The last question related to business that I have is what a lot of people who listen to you now are really probably obsessed about is success. I want to be successful. And I would love to hear from you, because objectively you're very successful. How do you measure success? Did you change that over time? How do you know you're successful? And how is success linked to your happiness or not?
Okay, do you have another hour? Then we can. That's a big one, Frederick. So, of course, you start your career, coming back to what we have discussed before, that you measure your success where you stand in the ranking, right? Mm-hmm. The soccer analogy is like, if you win the championship, people would consider that as a success mm-hmm. for a soccer club in Europe. So, of course, that's an element of success, right? Obviously, you're on paper successful in what you're doing. And yes, I would like to grow with my company faster than the industry is growing, ideally even faster than anybody else, right? So for me, that's a success. But this success in itself is irrelevant because it comes back to the point, if I do this, there's growth. If there's growth, there's invest. I believe you can only do it if you have the right culture. So it's fun to work there in this culture. So the real success is that you have a fulfilled day. Mm-hmm. I even would not talk about happiness. Happiness goes for me too much into this fun area. But I think for me to move the happiness, a happy day, a good smile, to move this really in fulfillment, that you say, okay, that was a good day, and people are growing. You can develop people. People are positive. They like this part of their career. They like this part of the journey in their life, and they're here, and that's okay. And for me, the past success is also not that important, right? It's not like, if we would have a discussion, I wouldn't tell you what I did in 6 years ago. It doesn't really matter so much. For me, it's more about the dream, mm-hmm. what is all possible in the future. So this dreaming of what is possible, mm-hmm. And trying to achieve this and overcome what you think is possible, then that's. I think then I feel really in a way fulfilled, and then I'm, as you say, happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. I'd love to wrap up our interview with 5 rapid-fire questions, if it's okay with you.
Of course.
The first one is, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A race car driver.
Race car driver. What would you tell your 20-year-old self when you look back?
Be even more open for life.
If you were to do it all over again, what would you change?
So what I would really change? I would say take care of others even way earlier in your life, right? It's in the beginning of your career, you think about being pretty selfish about how to be successful.
Thank you. Guilty pleasures.
I'm not sure if I confess them here, but obviously a little bit more sport, a little bit more discipline, and certain eating and drinking habits wouldn't harm. So that journey continues as well.
And finally, what is the moment when you look back you're the most proud of?
I'm getting closer and closer really to my kids. I have 4 kids, and I'm really most proud of when I have the feeling I could contribute to their upbringing in terms of how they reflect who they are as human beings. This will never end, and maybe I'm even not perfect in this, but I think that gives me a lot of, this gives me a big smile.
Very nice. Well, thank you very much, Peter Goldschmidt, Group CEO of STADA. It was a pleasure to have you on the podcast. You can find this entire podcast on gnu.com. Peter, a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I'm really happy we could cover all these insights and learnings from you, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope you found it insightful. You can listen to more episodes and register to receive notifications when new podcasts are published on our website, www.genio.com.